controversy over Cross River State oil producing status may be heading toward a decisive resolution, either in favor or against Cross River State. They lost that status, and it was a Supreme Court judgment. Well, as that judgment now being, is it valid or not? Is it in law? What does it mean? But the federal government's Interagency Committee on Nigeria's oil producing state has submitted its final verification report to the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission following a 6-month nationwide review of crude oil and gas coordinates. The report reportedly validates more than 1,000 oil and gas locations across 12 states and projects that Cross River State could regain oil producing status with over 100 verified wells, many linked to OML 114 within its maritime territory. However, the implications of a 2012 Supreme Court judgment are expected to retain 76 wells in Akwa Ibom State pending further judicial interpretation, where RAMFAC is now expected to forward the report to President Bola Tinubu. And why is RAMFAC dragging feed or developed code feed all of a sudden? The president is supposed to give his own approval, a decision that could significantly reshape revenue allocation and Nigeria's fiscal federalism structure. Well, I'm being joined on the program by a very well-known senior advocate of Nigeria, a former Ministry of Justice and Attorney General, Mr. Mike Anduaka. Thank you so much indeed for joining us. It's good to see you, sir.
Thank you, my colleague.
Thank you so much indeed. And also we have Honorable John Lebo, a former Speaker of the House of Assembly in Cross River State. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you, Sharon.
I'll begin with you, AGF, and you, you know the history. You know it way too well. And I know the sentiment that you have because you know so much about these conflicts and the controversy around the status of Cross River State. But would you say this is a scientific verification exercise or a politically convenient recalibration of Nigeria's oil revenue map?
Well, thank you very much. I speak more on the historical facts, what I did and what the former presidents, President Obasanjo, and then the subsequent President Yaradua, which I was the lead person in the Nigerian delegation, the UN-backed Cameroon-Nigerian Mixed Commission. Let me get you back the Green Trail Agreement, which came into force in 2006, signed by President Obasanjo and President Biya in New York, witnessed by UN Secretary General Kofi Annan and the Germany, representatives of Germany, United Kingdom, USA, and France. And this followed up in the meetings we had, the Mixed Commission meetings which were holding to iron up the implementation of the Green Trail Agreement. At that time, we were not dealing with Cross River or Akwa Ibom State, but we were dealing with how it cannot, the implementation of the ICJ will be harmoniously down, and the interests of Nigeria in the coastal area will be protected. Because the ICJ did not mention Akwa Ibom or Cross River. But whether we have strategic infrastructures in the Cross River State, particularly the Eastern Naval Command, which was established during Gawan around 1970s, around 1974, with a lot of equipments. And those equipments, it was our duty to protect and ensure that our Navy have access to the sea. That was well negotiated out with the Cameroons under the Green Trail Agreement. And we have effectively protected our Navy. An issue arose in 2008 when I was to go and hand over. There were strong agitations from the people led by the senators there who petitioned to the president. And the president directed myself and the High Command of the Navy should go to the National Assembly and speak to the Joint Ad Hoc Committee of the Senate and the House of Representatives, where concerns were that if you say Cross River was hemmed out, then in the eastern side of Nigeria, coastal area of Nigeria will be hemmed out. Not issue of Cross River being hemmed out, but Nigeria will be hemmed out. Therefore, we went there, and the Navy demonstrated the map we saw, and the map that was submitted to the National Assembly at that time, in 2008, was clearly that there was access to the sea through the estuary from Calabar estuaries. So, when I left office and I started hearing that Cross River as a whole is hemmed out, I was lost.
So you think that the 2012 judgment of the Supreme Court has some fault in it?
I'm not saying I cannot fault Supreme Court judgment. But what we presented, if it's not presented to them, the Supreme Court relies on what was presented to them. And of course, I have read the Supreme Court judgment too. And in the final analysis, the Supreme Court was also talking of code demarcation and coordinates, you know. I don't want to talk about that. But the time we actually handed over Bakassi, we ensured that Nigerian security and interests, which were heavily invested in Cross River, were protected. And we have ample access as a coastal state. By implication, our Navy having access.
So technically, Leonard Stake,
yes,
technically, you think that Cross River State deserve to recollect that status?
I think so. I don't even think they ought to have been deprived.
What do you then make of the Supreme Court judgment?
Well, Supreme Court
because
judgment,
still
as it is down, but a new dimension has arose. The continental shelf, which I also was the person who made the presentation. First, for increase of continental shelf boundary at the United Nations. I was the person. And got the approval. And I'm so happy that the President Bola Ahmed followed it up and we have an increase in continental shelf. And then with the increase in continental shelf, vis-a-vis the position of Cross River and the estuaries, I believe the new discovery, they ought to have entitled me.
So, in law, because Supreme Court stands as at the very top of our court system, our judicial system, and when the Supreme Court makes a decision, that decision is law. And to that effect, one will imagine to obviate the position of the Supreme Court. How do you go about it? By technical report.
I'm not talking.
If there are new, because what the bone of contention here is that the Supreme Court has made a decision. Is that there's a position of the law about it. If there are new development or new positions or new knowledge about the situation of things, what do you think that should happen?
Well, Supreme Court has always been not just a court of law, but a court of justice and a court of policy. And instances exist where the Supreme Court can reverse itself, and if emerging facts are glaring, I'm talking of the general position of the law, including issue of fraud, judgment obtained by fraud, if the circumstances appear that there was a miscarriage of justice and the judgment was obtained by misrepresentation, Supreme Court can revisit. I'm not talking of Cross River issue, but Cross River is talking of new coordinates, taking the coordinates from what we did. Of course, the map, if you go see Cameroon map, you can see clearly that I don't see where Cross River could have been said to be hemmed out. And if these new facts emerge and they are collectively given or presented,
new facts,
that is one aspect. Another aspect is that Supreme Court can revisit cases where there is gross injustice. For instance, we have the case of Savannah Bank versus Ejelo. Bank were suffering, just like maybe Cross River is saying they're suffering. If you were turning a loan from a bank without governor's consent, the banks were unable to. For quite some time, that was the position of the law. People will go to court, go to the bank, get money, and go make sure the bank, see the governor of the state where the land is situated, did not give consent. and the money perish. And when the injustice came so much, Supreme Court revisited the case and made sure that such agreements are still enforceable, equitably enforceable.
So
now we are talking of here in Cross River, new discovery. I'm not talking of what Supreme Court ruled, which is 76, but the new discoveries.
So I was asking
procedurally,
procedurally, when there's a position of the Supreme Court, and there are new facts, how do you now fix it? Because the position of the Supreme Court is law. Akwa Ibom said is recognized. Cross River said is not.
No, but the position now is this: 96 ways, but the new discoveries are not part of the Supreme Court decision. And these are issues that equitable common sense will come in. And of course,
but can you now, can you then override the position of the Supreme Court with a report, just a mere report of a technical committee?
The judgment, the Supreme Court that confined itself to 76 way cannot be any stretch of imagination be extended to include the new oil wells found as a result of the extension.
I imagine that people should go back to the Supreme Court.
Well, people might go, but this new discovery requires a political wisdom.
So this is a political action that could be taken
for the new discovery,
but legally incorrect until that has been fixed, isn't it?
No, I am saying the new discoveries because the Supreme Court judgment tied to the 76 oil wells. But you have additional oil wells as a result of extension discovered, and also the strong argument on the part, particularly that if you have the Calabar insurance, there's no way you can say the whole of that area is hemmed out. Because if it's hemmed out, means you need to remove the naval base from there. Of course, practically you also have a Calabar port there. So these are clear examples that political wisdoms can revisit that area. You see, the two states appear to have enjoyed a good relation for quite a long time. And again, the new state the two states appear to have produced one of the greatest leaders in this country. And the leader is Senator Godwin Akpabio, who can resolve this issue because he can go above personal interest. Because when your neighbor is poor and you are rich, you are endangering your security.
Give me a moment, Mr. Ndoaka. Let me come to Honorable Lebo. And I wanted the former AGF to give us that historical background. He's in the know, he was in the deep, he understands the issues, and it was important for him to give her, because I know that in a lot of ways you will be biased, being a son of the soil.
Yes.
Where is this continental shelf? Where is it discovered? Where are these new oil wells that have been discovered?
Okay, first, when the governor came in, he put up a case management strategy team, because Nigeria ought to have had a case management strategy team after the judgment of the ICJ. First, to do situation analysis, gap analysis, and a gap closure strategy. Then Nigeria too has to go back and demarcate the boundary between Nigeria, Cameroon, Nigeria, Equatorial Guinea, and the internal boundary between Cross River and Akwa Ibom. So when the governor came, we looked at the ICJ map, we looked at the continental shelf geology, we looked at all the estuaries in Nigeria, and then we picked out the judgment of the Supreme Court. We say first, the judgment of the ICJ Cross River is not opposed to it. The judgment of the Supreme Court in 2012, we are not opposed to it. But we were able to produce compelling evidence, which we submitted to the president based on two issues. The first issue is that first, the decision of the Supreme Court dealt with specific issues, and the judgment, the lead judgment, ended up with saying the 13% derivation revenue on the 76 oil wells offshore between Akwa Ibom and Cross River State must continue to be attributed to the state on whose maritime territory they are found to be located by the relevant government agencies. That is the National Boundary Commission, RAMFAC, relating to the Office of the Surveyor General of that. So the Supreme Court distinguish between surface, water, maritime territory, and continental shelf geology. The difference between water territory is that this is the water. The continental shelf is that what is under the water is prolonged and is elongated and is not determined by the body of water, which is why the International Court of Justice...
Meaning that whatever you see on the surface of the water might be in my compound, but deep down it has moved beyond my compound.
One of the mystery of God is in the architecture of continental shelf geology, and that is why the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea 1982 took away the rights for the management and extension of continental shelf from countries to the United Nations Commission on Continental Shelf, which the AG applied for the extension of that continental shelf. So the Supreme Court, realizing the declaration of the Supreme Court that Cross River State is not a littoral state does not stop Cross River State from owning oil wells. Ogun State is not a littoral state, is a littoral state, they have no oil well. Anambra is not a littoral state, Imo, Abia, and they are oil producing. So they're in Nigerian constitution and in Nigerian oil and gas, there is onshore oil wells and there are offshore oil wells. The Cross River State continental shelf geology, based on the Cross River Basin, down from Udukpani, down to the mouth of the sea, even if you say we don't have that prolongation, contain enough surface coordinates. And in law, oil and gas law, oil follow coordinates follow reservoir. So we are not opposed to the Supreme Court judgment. What we always said is that let the interagency committee also confirm the locations of these 76 oil wells based on the judgment of the Supreme Court. Because if you distinguish this judgment from Imo and River State, the court gave the name of the coordinates, the location of the host communities, and gave out the exactly where they are located. In Rivers and Akwa Ibom, the court gave definitely, in Cross River and Akwa Ibom, in this case, the court said the agencies should go back and fix it. Now, independent of the agencies going to fix it, what we did was to say, we presented this petition to the president and raised two arguable issues. Number one, from the map of the ICJ and the failure of the National Boundary Commission to demarcate our boundaries 24 years after that judgment, there's a body of water that Nigeria has not taken possession of. The Navy produced a hydrographic survey which clearly shows that if we don't protect this water was given to Nigeria, you can't wish it away. And Navy produced that document, federal government adopted it, and Navy is collecting pilotage levy, that is for pilots who decide to take refuge in the estuary. They are towage levy. If a vessel is bad and they want to tow it into the estuary, is there. Then environmental pollution under the MAPO Convention law. The estuary exists not by virtue of the provision of a law, but it's geography and nature.
Let me quickly ask you. The National Boundary Commission, the NBC, is involved here. RAMFAC is involved here. The presidency is also involved there. But are those who are saying that there are personalities who have intervened in this matter who said the two governors, Cross River and Akwa Ibom State, should have a dialogue, should meet. Have they met?
The president had ordered long ago that that should happen, but there's been some bias activities by some federal government agencies, and I explain to you why, and why this report is
that the reason why they've not met?
Yes, I'll come to that issue. The first is that this report, this particular exercise based by Cross River State, was based on urging Nigeria to recover its body of water so that you don't put Cross River State in danger of pirate activities, which Navy has done. As I speak to you, Navy is already collecting pilot and towage levy up to $11 million into Nigeria account. You can confirm that information. So the mouth of that estuary, by virtue of geography and law of the sea, exists. That's one. The second aspect is that these provisions, we wrote a letter to the National Boundary Commission, Revenue of these three agencies, and our question was simple. Can you show us the map after the judgment of the Supreme Court or after the FCJ showing that the Calabar estuary no longer exists? Because we say the estuary has been wiped out, the Nigerian map will be affected. The architecture of Nigeria will show. We asked for that map and show us the boundary with Cameroon and Equatorial Guinea. The reply to that letter is also attached to this document. National Boundary Commission said they are still negotiating the boundary between Cameroon, Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea, and that the boundary between Cross River and Akwa Ibom after the ICJ judgment has not been demarcated. Then we wrote to the Surveyor General of the Federation, it's your constitutional responsibility to produce map. Surveyor General of the Federation said, well, there's a map they tendered at the Supreme Court about onshore-offshore dichotomy that declared that Cross River is not littoral. We're not part of the map because it does not contain standard coordinates of Nigeria. Then we also wrote to the President, who wrote to the Revenue Mobilization, what is the position about Cross River State status to own oil well? What did the Supreme Court judgment say? I'll drop copies of that letter. The chairman of Revenue Mobilization replied to say, the judgment of the Supreme Court did not presuppose that Cross River will not have oil wells. The judgment affected its littoral status. If we see fresh evidence of ownership of wells, Cross River will be listed. That is why this evidence came in.
You've not mentioned the Supreme Court judgment of 2025 in the boundary allocation, which favored Cross Rivers on land and maritime-wise favored Akwa Ibom State.
First of all,
we are not
Cross River surface coordinate does not include coordinates from that area. We have not. There are two OMLs involved in that area, OML 231 and OML 451. Because of the issues involved in that judgment, we have not visited that area. What is pronounced is the fact that we're talking about 76 oil wells from the Supreme Court. When we presented the evidence coordinates of 245 wells, the committee verified on ground, well by well, 239. Our argument is that we are entitled to all of 239. but it is safe to remove the 76 oil wells of the Supreme Court so that in the future we can go back to the court and say this activity.
So fundamentally, this technical report of January 2026 is saying that deservedly that Cross River can have the status of oil producing state. Is that right?
Yes. Because
where does it lie? The only thing that is remaining now is that RAMFAC is in favor. The technical report is in favor. But there is a need for presidential approval in this matter before that can be passed. Is that right?
Yes, yes.
And afterwards, the 13% oil reservation formula will be in favor of Cross River State. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
So what is your prayer tonight as a state? What are you telling the Nigerian people?
As a state, what I'm telling the Nigerian people that the fact that the Supreme Court declared Cross River State as not a littoral state does not stop Cross River State from owning oil wells. We have onshore oil wells. Number two is that we do not actually need the judgment of the ICJ sitting out Bakassi. We don't need that judgment to be able, because the court did not sit out any oil well between Nigeria and Cameroon.
So what is Cross River State losing by not benefiting as an oil producer?
Cross River State would have lost approximately about 9 to 10 billion per month by virtue of the new coordinates that were found. Now, we have 239 coordinates. Even this report, we have issues. We must give credit to whoever put this report together and that team, because that report deals more with what Nigeria is losing, about 1.7 trillion in oil revenue. So its Cross River State matter is even secondary to Nigeria. But the point is that Cross River State is losing as much, 239 oil wells calculated by production level. That's what Cross River State is losing. But the committee still went ahead and said this, what they have done across all the 10 oil producing states is that they divide whatever is found equilibrium of 50-50 using the geological configuration of the continental shelf. And that's what they did in Cross River matter. Our argument is to say, give us our 239, but that's what the committee resolved.
We need to go now. Let us see. If you have the power to resolve this, what would you be doing right now?
I will first invite the leaders of the South, especially the Senate President, to show wisdom and leadership and put the state together and make sure that both states, there's a win-win situation. Especially exclude the 76 oil wells that are incumbent, but focus on the new discovery and ensure the Cross River that houses very strategic military equipment that protects that area, the territorial area of the Eastern Naval Command, have a share of the new discoveries. That will be my position. And when I say the president should show leadership, is this: when you are elevated beyond a certain level, you don't think as a person from that state.
Thank you, sir.
You think more of the leader, and you make sacrifices so that the country, there will be peace and there will be harmony within the South, especially between Akwa Ibom and Cross River.
Former Justice Minister and Attorney General of the Federation, Mr. Michael Anduaka, thanks so much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Honorable John Lebo, former Speaker of the House of Assembly in Cross River, said thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate it.